Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, audiophiles and music lovers. Today I'll be reviewing the Meze Empyrean 2 headphones. I hope you enjoy this. Meze has introduced an updated version of their well-received Empyrean headphones. As before, the Empyrean 2 is a planar magnetic headphone, which means the drivers that create the music use a slightly different mechanism than is typical on headphones using so-called dynamic drivers. Planar drivers are larger, this one is 7 square inches, and are driven across their entire surface, a technology that is often thought to bring sonic benefits. Specifically, the Empyrean 2 uses a Rhinaro isodynamics driver, which uses 2 different signal traces on the diaphragm to optimize output at both low and high frequencies. This isoplanar diagram weighs 0.16 grams and has a response up to 110,000 hertz. We'll talk more about bass in a bit. The Empyrean 2 is a wired, open-back headphone with a CNC milled frame. The headphones come with 2 sets of magnetically attached ear pads, one of which angles the driver so that they are closer to the ear at the front, presumably to invoke a different response from your outer ear. The headphones weigh about 1 pound, like most of the competition. I think I've talked about this before, but they're almost all 1 pound plus or minus a tiny little bit. That said, the Empyrean seemed exceptionally comfortable to me, perhaps due to a well-designed headband and soft ear pads with ideal pressure. The Empyrean 2 is priced at $29.99 in the US. This review is part of our series on wired headphones over $1,000. We'll do a roundup once we've been through as many of the major players as we can get to. All right, let's talk about sound quality. I thought the Empyrean 2 was the most neutral, best balanced headphone we've had in the lab so far. There are more headphones to come, so I don't mean that as a definitive conclusion, but simply to indicate that there is a lot of meat on this bone. I should also say that neutrality, as measured by rendering music like the absolute sound, which is the sound of real instruments in a real space, is a standard that has shown to correlate with musical enjoyment for many, many listeners. However, what is neutral and balanced overall really may not be completely compelling for you, because every headphone deviates from neutrality to some degree, and so you have to choose your preferred form of deviance. Also, while we have pretty strong arguments that neutrality is the path to musical enlightenment, you may not agree. I'll try to give you some info on how the Empyrean 2 might fit with your tone-twisting desires if that's how you approach musical reproduction. Here are some details of what I heard. First, the low to mid bass of the Empyrean 2 is solid. I think there's a very slight mid bass elevation and some roll-off in the very low bass, but these headphones are a treat on modern pop. The response here is just about ideal based on the Harman research into listener preferences. The reason I say this is that more bass would slow down the feeling of some recordings and throw bass instrumental detail toward the window, if not over the threshold. Listening to Pearl Jam's Dark Matter, you get a beautiful balance of bass weight and detail. I thought that Ivor Slor also showed off the ability of the Empyreans to deliver potent bass with detail. And on Dua Lipa's Radical Optimism, we hit the point where I really didn't want bigger bass and felt that the mixing engineers had gone a smidge too far if realism is your goal. That's the price of mixing with Bluetooth boomboxes in mind. The Empyrean bass works well on impressively many recordings, including older recordings from the 1950s and 1960s like Sonny Rollins' Freedom Suite or John Lee Hooker's Burnin'. This is an accomplishment especially for open back headphones, which, by the way, have some other benefits. I should say that I think the Hi-Fi Man Susvara low to mid bass is slightly better with just a tad more detail and no loss of power. I will also say that I think that the upper bass of the Empyrean is just slightly elevated. This leads to a very small loss of detail and harmonic air on jazz or small ensemble tracks, but I also found that a lot of rock, where bass is more of a foundational than a solo element, means this profile can add a sense of balance, and a lot of people want that sense of balance. The second big win for the Empyrean 2 is, speaking of balance, the overall top to bottom balance. These headphones are pretty flat octave to octave, meaning that they lack the obvious tilt that tips up the treble or bass on some other very smooth headphones. The Empyrean bass has mid-range and treble all running at about the same level, which is, I think, quite nice. Take a look at this curve and you may see what I mean. Keep in mind that plus or minus 10 dB variations from flat are common in headphones. Careful viewers will notice that the mid-range is very slightly depressed, and you sometimes hear this. It mostly moves vocals back a smidge in the mix, and because the depression is smooth, it doesn't really alter most instrumental tonality. You can hear this positioning of the vocalist back a step or two on Waxahachie's Tiger's Blood. A similar effect comes through on Death Cab for Cutie's Transatlanticism. If you are coming from mid-range dominant headphones like Grados or AKGs, this may be disturbing. Otherwise, it's pretty subtle and doesn't mess up the mix much at all. There's often a difficult transition to treble in headphones. Part of this is because of the frequency shaping needed that is technically very hard to do, that dang Harman curve again. I thought the Empyreans got this very close to right. There's a slight low treble tiz on a few tracks, but frankly I could imagine this might be part of the recording, not really a flaw of the headphones. Watch some videos of singers making recordings and you'll know what I mean. And those darn boom boxes and low-end car stereos tempt mastering engineers to do bad things. To explain how the Empyreans succeed in the treble range, consider the Nielsen string quartets, played by the Danish String Quartet. I was impressed by the violin tone on this recording. On the Empyreans, you hear not an overly rounded, dull, soft tone, nor a sharp or thin tone. For those of you who are concert goers, this is kind of a Row J tone profile where you hear a mix of bow against string plus ample harmonic body. Cymbals on jazz recordings sounded extended and detailed and reminded me of how many headphones are disturbingly splashy in this range. Finally, I want to say that I think the Empyreans do an excellent job on low-level detail. For example, on Billie Eilish's album Hit Me Hard and Soft, you can hear acoustic reverb going on and on and on. Now, that slight mid-range depression can remove the sense of airiness or reduce the sense of airiness a bit, but overall I think the drivers of the Empyrean work impressively well with small signals. In summary, the Meze Empyrean 2s do many things right, and they focus on doing the big things well, while any flaws are largely consigned to the world of mild sonic flavoring and don't really get in the way of the music. $3,000 is not a small amount to pay, but so far, I haven't found better for less. I hope you've enjoyed this review of the Meze Empyrean 2 headphones. Each week, we bring you many more reviews in our weekly newsletters. You can get a subscription at the link in the description. It's free. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you again soon.